Namaskar. Good evening and welcome to the fifth talk in the series of studies in Aurobindo. Today we have Dr. Chhalamayi Reddy, who is currently the principal of Aurobindo International Center of, Aurobindo International School at Hyderabad. She has been an ex-student of Aurobindo International School, Pondicherry, and she completed her graduation here. After which she has done her PhD from Pondicherry University and has been dedicated to spreading integral education the way she has learned in the ashram school to other people outside, especially in Hyderabad. And she has been trying to incorporate Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's integral education method into the CBSE and ICSE board syllabi. It is her effort that the school in Hyderabad, that is Aurobindo International School, has successfully completed 50 years, and another school, a residential school near Hyderabad called New Creation, it's a residential school which has been started with her endeavors. Dr. Chhalamayi Reddy is fully dedicated to this cause and keeps incessantly working towards spreading integral education to any corner of India and world that is possible. Today, she is going to speak on integral education, a joyous adventure, a joyous alternative. We will see through her how she has incorporated integral education into the mainstream, as well as how Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's principles given by Mother and Sri Aurobindo of physical, vital, mental, and psychic education can be brought into the mainstream education. I invite now Dr. Chhalamayi Reddy to kindly take over and share with us her joyous journey of integral education.
Thank you, Shruti. And hello to all my young friends and namaste to all the elder ones. So education is, I think, a subject which concerns us all. And because it is the cause and solution to all the problems of right living, and that is what all of us think. And different generations, all of us, young, old, would look at it according to our perceptions. And we have different expectations of it. So unlike all the other subjects, all the subjects that we have studied of Sri Aurobindo, which is more a matter of, high intellect, education is something which we all want to, kind of deal with a sense of urgency, as it involves us all. So either we have children who are being educated, or we have just stepped out of the portals of education institutions. So also we must not forget that it is a very complex subject and its scope is very wide. So we can't really be taking into consideration everything about education or everything about integral education. So here what we are going to do today is we are going to address issues related to the ideals of education. So I would like to share with all of you that the talk will consist of 3 parts. Firstly, the goal and purpose of education. Secondly, the vision and practice of integral education. And third is something which is very interesting and which has just come through, which is the National Education Policy 2020. Okay. So to begin with, we need to revisit the goals and purpose of education as is usually understood. So what is expected of education? So the one continuing purpose of education since ancient times has been to bring people to a sense of full realization as possible of what a human being is. So this is a broad perspective that the humanistic view, approaches education with. But generally, it is not something so holistic. There are more prevalent goals which are more partial in nature, and they have been widely accepted also. But as I said, more of, part of these and not the whole of it. So either it is to develop the intellect or to serve social needs or to contribute to the economy or to create an effective workforce or of course to prepare students for a job or a career. or to promote a particular social and political system. So these are all the various kind of goals generally, that education has for itself. But these purposes offered are generally limited in scope and do conflict with the larger, broader humanitarian purposes, because they are, as I said, very partial in their objective and their purpose. So they imply a partially distorted view of human existence because they're looking at human beings very partially. Let us go back to the past. In India, in 1835, we all know that Lord Macaulay introduced English education to create. Why did he do this? To create a workforce of clerks and administrators to serve them, to serve their purpose under the British Raj. And this, of course, added to the short-sightedness regarding the very aims of education. Let us go back now to try to find out how was education in ancient times in India. So a simple singular, not a singular, very important, that is the most important feature of ancient Indian civilization was that the religious and spiritual influence had to be the most dominant over the life of the people. These high ideals or these orientations were reflected in the attitudes. We can say attitudes practiced under the framework of dharma, what we understand as dharma, and in the social, political, economic, and cultural life of the people. And those ideals reflected in this in the life of the people in all these aspects. So in education, this distinctive tendency manifested to the maximum because education was sought as a means of self-realization and salvation, as because that was the highest end of life. That is what the spiritual literature and spirituality spoke about at that point of time. So the entire end of life was mukti or emancipation. Hence, the most ancient literature for a period of thousands of years, we all know about this, bore an exclusive spiritual stamp. The Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Bhagavad Gita are all such examples of such sacred texts which have been passed on through those ancient times to us. Now, ancient Indian education is to be understood in the light of its vision of life and death. So we need to understand the fact that education was, designed or framed in the light of this vision of life and death and its perspective of the material and spiritual, perishable or permanent values of life. Thus, the focus was to study only the fundamental truths of life and not the half-truths or intermediate truths. So, of course, we also know that that was not the only thing, notwithstanding the fact that the Indian education also taught what we have come to know as the 64 kalas. And out of the 64 kalas of innumerable vocations in trade and crafts, art and crafts. But even, there were branches more than 64. It's supposed to be going into 800 different sub kind of sections in terms of what a student could learn in terms of skills, different kind of skills. But the Hindu thought, it's important to understand the fact that in the light of this spiritual framework, the Hindu thought conceived of the individual, of the human being, primarily as a soul, inhabiting the body, life, mind. And not the Western point of view that we are not really taking into consideration the soul and it is only the human being consisting of the body, mind, life. Again, I repeat, in the Hindu concept, the soul was inhabiting the body, life, mind. Hence, the supreme duty and self-fulfillment of a person lay in the realization of the absolute. As the human being is the potential God, a spark of the divine. The soul is the spark of the divine, and we had to realize this soul. So self-realization was the most important goal in life. So thus, education primarily had to aid in this self-fulfillment and not in merely the acquisition of objective knowledge. So I think all of us now are very clear about the main objective. It was concerned more with the subject rather than the object, the inner rather than the outer. And what did they do? How did they go about doing this? I think we all are familiar with the term yoga. And there, that point of time, they had this process of purification, which used to be known as chitta vritti nirodha, through the means of self-discipline and meditation. So there was a lot of this sense of meditation, going inward, trying to introspect, trying to really, through a lot of meditation and a sense of ascesis, they had to really learn and realize what is within a person. But over the centuries, what happened? Of course, invasions disrupted these traditional education systems as foreign armies raided education institutes. We all know this, among other establishments. Of course, they raided so many others and they destroyed our great education institution as well. So during the Middle Ages, so we are coming during the Middle Ages, there was a divide between the spiritual and academic knowledge. So although the academic knowledge also had a sense of balance between science and humanities, it kind of, moved away from the spiritual education. So this setup shifted from the concept of the ashrama to the Gurukula, followed by educational institutions, to colleges, to schools, and then private tuitions under the British rule. So we are coming to the modern period now. Okay, all of us, you and me, we are all products of the post-independence education, where we have experienced that it completely severed ties with the higher aims of life and became aggressively utilitarian in its motives. So education became very much utilitarian in its whole objective. So, but before the independence also, let us remind ourselves that the ashram school at Pondicherry was started by the mother in 1943. So few years before the independence. And the children who came with their parents during World War II sought shelter at the feet of the mother and Sri Aurobindo. So the mother herself became the teacher for these children. So over the years, we have seen what that institution has become. It has become definitely the premier, one of the premier schools in the country. It was officially inaugurated way back in 1952, and it was renamed in 1959 as what we know it as Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education. And I had this unique privilege to be a student in that fantastic, a school which is incomparable according to me. So, Shruti, can you please come up with the quotation? So I would like to share with all of you what the mother has said about education. She said, education does not mean that learning is just for the sake of earning money through one's life. Although that too is a necessary objective. But the education should indeed involve all parts of our being, physical, vital, mental, psychic, and spiritual. So I think the message is very clear that it should not be only addressed to earning one's living. So the very disengaging firstly from the purely utilitarian motive, the pragmatic motive of having to kind of score good marks so that we can get a good job in the acquisition of knowledge for itself is itself an initial step to ensuring it to becoming a joyous experience. Because I think we all understand that the pressure that the student goes through to try to qualify himself is so burdensome and so stressful that the sense of joy is completely lost in that experience of education. So the other quotation, it's not a quotation, it's actually a prayer which all of us at school here at Hyderabad also pray every day, and it's something very, very important. So Shruti, can I again request you to please share the prayer? Yes. It is not for a family. It is not to secure a good position. It is not to earn money. It is not to obtain a diploma that we study. We study to learn, to know, to understand the world, and for the sake of the joy that it gives us. How beautiful, isn't it? But yeah, it is very hard to imagine, looking at the present scenario of educational institutions, if whether such an ideal is at all possible to conceive, leave alone implement it. So this, but it's also true that this very negative mindset, for us, we say that this is impossible. So this itself, this negative mindset itself obstructs the possibility of its realization. And this kind of a thinking must actually be discarded. So then let's question ourselves. Do we have only two ways? So the first way is of that preconceived goal, which all the parents expect the children to become an engineer, an IS officer, a doctor, so an IT kind of a professional, and so on and so forth. And so what does the student do? They absolutely gear themselves and they work intensely towards the end to obtain the grade they get if they are going to study well. That's option number two. So there might be there might be students who just are very sick and tired of this whole system. They are problem that we are trying to uh, really try to get into a certain kind of a job of our liking, but sometimes we are not able to. So both of these are not really necessarily a guarantee for us, we can say. Okay. So what do we do then? Because we also have to understand that the ends govern the means, and what we shall sow, that we shall reap. So if the whole, expectations of education is purely pragmatic and utilitarian, so the outcome also is the kind of, education, the society that we are creating, which is, at least for, to me, it is a kind of, in a situation, a mess, because despite all this so-called very hi-fi education that we are providing to the students, uh, the basic values of life are not being able to be, kind of practiced by the people. And why is it so? So we'll come to the second part of the talk. Now we are going to take up what the integral education offers, and what are its ideals and what are its practices. So firstly, we should start, with the concept of integral education, how the integral education perceives the child. The child, according to, in the perception, in the format, in the framework of integral education, is a soul in evolution. And the child is not a prospective kind of an investment, as as I said, this whole pragmatic institutions, I mean pragmatic education has as its objectives. So the general ideas of parents are that the child will become the pride of the family, will take care of them, be in a high position, become successful and wealthy. All that is fine. As the mother said, it is important to also earn our bread and butter. But we need to question whether being materially successful is the only goal of life. Or instead, if it is to awaken something from within, awaken the soul, awakening and unfolding of the spiritual being within each one of us. So this is the true intention of education. You see, that is why uh, we all know for the fact that what is within us as a potential needs to be brought forth, needs to be create a situation, and a circumstances should be created where it blossoms forth. So for if we want this, then we need a new kind of education that would consciously go beyond the mundane aims of schooling and create a growth oriented and evolutionary culture amongst youth. So it needs to be distinct from only a practically functional social education. So that part of it, I think we need to be very clear. So it has to awaken the highest and deepest in man, in a human being, molded by the truth of the soul. So it cannot be an education merely for the body, or for the emotions, or for the mind. Uh, all the three need to find their inspiration in the light of the soul, it being the most important principle in a human being, because that is what, according to integral education, that is the perception, that is what is the human being is perceived of as the fact that the soul is inhabiting the body, life, mind. So it is our education that molds most significantly, isn't it, our beliefs, our attitudes and culture. So if we must create a new future, we must create a new consciousness in our youth. So how do we go about it? This means that the education for the future will have to be a consciousness education, if we can call it that. Okay, an education nurturing the growth of a higher consciousness in all aspects and parts of the being. That is higher consciousness in the life, in body, in the vital, the emotions and the body as well. Okay, so then how do we go about it this? So while integral education will be an education of the whole person, that is what first thing we need to understand. While most of the education practiced in generally in schools, focuses almost exclusively on the head, on the cognitive skills, isn't it? So, but when we speak about integral education, it has to focus on the heart and the body as well. That is very important. And primarily it has to concentrate on the development of the inner being, which is the soul. So the inmost being or the soul or the psychic being is the growing divine in each one of us, in each individual, that insists always on the truth, the good and the beautiful. It is the center of the spiritual values. So it is the psychic being in the child which actually gives the uniqueness and the strength and beauty which needs to be brought out in all aspects of the child's life. So we need to understand, when we say that every child is unique, the uniqueness actually lies in the psychic being or the soul. I would like to, kind of share with all of you that I am using both soul and psychic being as the same. There is a difference, but at this point of time, I'm not getting into the difference. So to achieve this end, things needs to be done. And what are they? First, the finding of the soul or the psychic being in ourselves, the inner being, the inmost being rather, which is the seat and center of our psychological being. And next, the second part of it is the training and development of the mind, the emotions, and the body. These have to be organized around the center of our identity, which is the soul or the psychic being. Now, this implies that the soul will be the pivot of the whole progress. So we have to always pay attention to this part. As I said, it is a center where the spiritual values are there, are hidden in there. So we have to give expression to it. We have to manifest them. So we have to give a lot of importance to the psychic center. So what does our psychic being do? It aspires for truth, beauty and goodness, harmony and love. And it actually guides us, that the divine essence, the divine personality in us, the divine kind of truth, the psychic being is the one which actually guides us to walk the sunlit path of truth and righteousness, and gives us the inner strength. We are to face all difficulties, because we keep facing difficulties, and the psychic being is the one which can actually guide us and give us the necessary courage. So, and it is also very importantly the source of joy, the source of true joy, unconditional joy, and the source of true love. And it also ignites the aspiration for constant progress. So it is not, so much the outer being of life, mind, body, which really, kind of is motivated to grow and progress. It is always the soul within which wants to grow into becoming a better and a better human being. And hence, to self-exceed and to bring forth the innate potential becomes the real focus of the integral education. So we have spoken about the psychic being, but how do we get in touch with our psychic being? What does the mother say about this? So let us again read what she has said. Shruti, can I request you to share it? Yes, the starting point is to seek in yourself that which is independent of the body and the circumstances of life, which is not born of the mental formation that you have been given, the language you speak, the habits and customs of the environment in which you live, the country where you are born, or the age to which you belong. You must find in the depths of your being that which carries in it a sense of universality, limitless expansion, unbroken continuity. Yeah, the next one, Shruti. What the human mental consciousness does not know and cannot do, this consciousness knows and does. It is like a light that shines at the center of the being, radiating through the thick coverings of the external consciousness. It is through this psychic presence that the truth of an individual being comes into contact with him and the circumstances of his life. So, I just like to say this in a simple language, okay? So here is the third way. Before we have spoken about two ways and we said, isn't there a third way? This is the third way. And what is this third way? The, the, the third way is to find within ourselves this unique potential. You see, first thing we need to understand, what does education, the very term education means, it comes from the Latin word educere, which means to bring forth, to bring out that which is already within us. Okay. So whether it's Swami Vivekananda or whether it's Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they have spoken about that which is already within us, the wisdom which is within us, that needs to be brought forth. So the teacher becomes purely a facilitator to make that which is already within us to be brought forth. You see, so that is the uniqueness. So this is the third way. The third way is for the child to be very sure of what his true calling is, what is true uniqueness, where does this his own unique, innate capacity, his passion, or we can say his calling, his dream, and even we can use the term genius. Where does this genius actually lie? So this child has to be made to discover this. And once we are creating an environment in the school which is enabling the child to really get connected to this, this speciality, this genius, this uniqueness within himself or herself, then if the child is able to kind of manifest that in his life, being able to really work it through in his life, then that profession becomes something which is most joyful for the person to really enjoy, or to work out in his course of life. So education, what does the education have to do? It has to also provide the training and development of the mind, the vital, which is emotions, and the physical of the child to express himself and herself. So this uniqueness has to express itself through the mind, through the emotions, and through the body. So, but it has to be kept importantly in mind that all the capacities need to be organized and integrated around the soul, which is the real self. Why? Because again, as is repeated, it is the center of the spiritual values. It seeks to manifest truth, goodness, and beauty. What in India we say Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, through all its expressions. Okay. So what do we also witness many schools which speak of all-round development or holistic development. Then where lies the difference? You can say, then how is integral education different? It also talks about holistic development. This is a very important point. See, if the development is purely on the mental, the vital or physical domains, without their integration, without their connection, without their connectivity, the integration around the psychic center, around this divine innate nature within a human being, then the outcome of it is of a very capable and successful person, no doubt about it. But as we see in society, basically they are egoistic in nature. So, it becomes like they're persons who glorify and live for themselves. So we have excellent professionals. It's not that we don't see people who are, who have excelled in the professions. But because that, the connection with their inner being is absent, it becomes purely glorified egoistic personalities who are living in society, and hence there's a lack of sense of love and a sense of giving. So the whole life is around their own selfish goals and interests. So you see, that is the difference, and we need to keep this in mind. So in ancient times, the way to come into contact with the soul was through, as we already spoke about, through process of tapasya or meditation, and a sense of, very intense ascesis. But in integral education, it will consist essentially of what the mother says. She wrote all this in her essay, Science of Living. It is a work of analyzing one's psychological movements and developing an accurate understanding of the parts of one's being. And so we, most of the time as a human being, we don't even know the parts. If we ask somebody, what is your identity, we most people, we fail to understand that. We need to understand that a human being is made of a body, of emotions, and of a mind. So all these aspects, we need to understand that these are different components which constitute a human being, and they have different kind of energies which actually have different dynamics. One is pulling the other, one is influencing the other. They're all kind of in a big state of a khichudi, and the working. So she says it's important that we begin to really observe and the workings of one's personality, which constitute firstly the first movement of integral education. And so these psychological tools, so what are the tools that we need to use for this kind of an introspection? We need to start with observation. We need to have a sense of introspection, reflection, all this, so mother has given many, many steps of stepping back, observing one's movements, and so on and so forth. So they all will culminate in a sense of a progressive self-awareness and self-mastery, leading finally to a sense of self-mastery. Then what then constitutes the training of development of the mind? So we have talked about how the psychic being has to be at the center of this development. Now let us take, all these different parts of the being. So what then constitutes the training and development of the mind, the emotions and the body? You see, the mother and Aurobindo again have extensively written about this, about the ideals, about the principles of how to achieve perfection in each of these parts of being, how to infuse the consciousness, the higher consciousness, the consciousness of the psychic being into the activities of the mind, into the activities of the vital, into the activities of the body. It is only then that both of them get connected, and the psychic beings, the light of the psychic being, the truth and goodness and beauty of the psychic being gets manifested and realized through mind, life, and body. So what are the different various practices in integral education for the mind, life, body? We are going to take that up. So unlike the usual concept of perceiving mental education being merely the receiving and processing, what do? We receive the information and process the information, and we teach the subjects and that too in snippets. As Aurobindo calls it, we teach it 40 minutes of this, 45 minutes of this, again 40 minutes of that. This is the general format of the mental education in schools. So instead of that, what Aurobindo talks about is the training and developing and perfecting of the instruments or powers of the mind. This is what he has written in his essays, and its various faculties. And what are these faculties? He says he lists them, he says concentration, observation, imagination, judgment, compare and contrast, the reasoning, analysis. He says, unless and until we as teachers are paying attention to the training of these faculties, purely trying to cover the syllabus and the information is going to be completely redundant. And especially these days in the modern digital world, I think, the computer, the online kind of information is so much, it's so overwhelming that at the press of a button, the students anyway come to know all sorts of information. So how the teacher has to understand that just passing on information from one source to the student is just absolutely a waste of time. And the students have access to much better information, more, better explained also. So hence we need to be very, very clear that it is not just covering the syllabus which is important. It is very important to be able to actually train the faculties of the mind, you see. So this is what actually we have been doing in our school. So I want to start giving some examples with our school. In our school also, we do pay attention to this. So, instead of just trying to cover the syllabus, we try to pay attention to the development of these faculties. And the important thing, we also takes into consideration Bloom's taxonomy, the 7 kind of, manner in which we have to learn a lesson. Then we also take into consideration to try to start with questioning first. We raise questions to the children before we try to, just unnecessarily just pass on the information to them. So raising of questions, making them to think, facilitating hot questions, which is higher order thinking. So these are something which we are, trying to practice in the high school, where it is not something purely in terms of a sense of a rote learning which is happening. Okay. So apart from this, the mother in her essay on the mental education has also talked about higher purpose of awakening and developing these powers and capacities of the mind as an effective instrument for higher evolution. So she talks about even 5 different aspects. I'm not going to get into that, but basically she's talking about how we can even raise our mental consciousness to higher realms so that, we get prepared for a higher kind of an evolution. So when students are engaged, in conceptual learning by means of sharpening the faculties of what we have just now spoken, and not merely to cover the syllabus, the process opens up to them a sense of exploration, discovery, and it challenges them. And this stimulates a sense of curiosity and the joy to self-exceed. You see, so that to self-excel replaces the need to prove superiority over the other. You see, competition is the most important thing in the education, in the academic world today. But so competition has to be replaced by the true joy and pursuit of excellence by seeking the infallible knowledge, by trying to seek and to excel oneself. So the difference that I'm making is to be able to, of what we have just read in the mother's prayer, for the joy of learning, it's the joy of knowing about the world. So that is very, very important. Now, coming to the education of the vital, it's the most important domain actually. It's the domain of, when we say the education of the vital, we are talking about the impulses and the emotions of a human being, of a child. So this is the most important field to train and discipline. And why is that? Because all of us human beings, we predominantly live in it, isn't it? I think most of the time of the day, we live in our emotions. And these emotions are very, very, very intransigent in its ways and fixed. And we suffer from prejudices and preferences. And we can say that these emotions are actually the seat of our egoistic desires, you see. So this education concerns with 2 parts. The mother speaks about 2 areas that we need to pay attention to. First, she talks about the sensitization of the senses, extending to the refinement and enrichment of the awakening of the aesthetic sensibility. Sense development leading to aesthetic sensibility. That's part number 1. Second part, the transformation of the emotional nature and the very character of a child. You see, now there is a great need. You see, this is an area which is very much neglected in schools. There's a great need in schools today to provide for this field of development, as it is largely, as I said, very much neglected. Now, a large number of activities can be arranged for children of all ages to engage in heightened sensory experience. Now, this can consist of drawing the children's attention to observation, to differentiating details in all sensory fields. Now, again, to bring some examples of our school, we have done this extensively, especially in the primary years. And I think all of us, many of us know about this, that the Montessori way of learning actually is a process which kind of encourages, which enables learning through the 5 senses. So all the 5 senses are in operation, and when the children goes through these kind of learning, then definitely the sensorial experience is heightened in the child. So it is something very, very, useful for the child to be able to develop the sensorial capacity. Even when we talk about sizes, shapes, even the alphabets are actually taught to the sensorial method. And apart from that, we take them, we kind of take the children into nature, and we try to make them to become aware of the, differentiating and enjoying all the different aspects of nature. So this also creates a sense of, as I said, heightening of the sensorial experience for them. So next, what follows, as we have said, the sensorial thing has to go on to the aesthetic sensibility. What follows is the awakening of the aesthetic sensibility, and this is possible by engaging in various fields of fine arts, whether it's art, whether it's music, dance, theater, all these different activities. You see, so the idea is to educate the senses and create tasteful exposure in all these different fields of music, art, dance, and so on and so forth. And children love this. Children take a lot of interest and are very happy to engage in these pursuits. I would like to share with you the fact that we have been doing a lot of things in these areas, you see. So right from the primary years, when we speak about the sensorial activities in the kindergarten and the early primary years, we start with that which is physical. We have provided them pottery, we have provided them clay modeling, and then they do craft, then they do art. You see, the first thing, learning by doing. So their sensitivity, their aesthetics are developed by things that they are doing from. They're doing with their hands. And then right from the middle school to the high school, we have provided them many options, options in music, nearly 4 options. We have tabla, we have keyboard, we have flute, we have what we call the vocal Indian and the vocal Western singing. Then we have dance. Then we have what you call uh, theater, we have drama, and in the high school we have home science, even things that they have to learn through by cooking, and so many other different kind of fields. And apart from that, we have come up with many clubs. So these clubs also encourage the children to experience the life element, the life skills. So we have clubs which we call as Sanskriti, which the children really learn about India and the greatness of India. So this is something which excites them, and they are able to share with all the children. Then we have something called Sahiti, which is a literary club where all the different the literature from different languages, of Hindi, Telugu, Sanskrit, is shared, and they learn about it through different sources, and they share it with the children. We also have an interesting club called Nipuna, which the scientific discoveries in India. So all, of course, focus more on India rather than the world for now, because it is important that children first learn about their own country and what their country has contributed to really encourage a sense of pride for their country. Then we also have a club called Srujana, which promotes art, artistic kind of all the different fields of art, whether it's music, whether it's dance. The children learn about all the great artists of India. Then we have, of course, something of the environment, Prakriti. Then we also have Chintan. We have also spoken just now about the fact that it is very important to make ourselves to learn more and more about ourselves. So Chintan is another such what you call club. So you see, in the vital education, we really have spread ourselves to many fields, which really makes it a very joyous experience for the children. The second part of what we spoke about, the second ideal of the transformation of the emotions and character, is more complex in its scope. Why? Because this needs a deeper understanding of the emotional needs and the natural rhythms of growth in children. You see, something that all of us teachers, we need to understand them in a total manner. We need to understand firstly their temperament, whether they are, children are different kinds. We need to understand whether they're more rational, whether they're responding to rational instructions, or whether they are more emotional in nature, or whether they are, what we can say, more physically inclined. Certain strictness is called for children who are not able to be very open through their mind or through their emotions. Secondly, we need to also know that children come up with different learning styles. You see, there's visual, there's audio, there's kinesthetic. All these are different learning styles which we need to be aware of when we speak about children. Then we also need to know that children can be either tamasic, either rajasic, or sattvic. You see, so all this, and also their inclination, whether they're more knowledge oriented, whether, they're more service oriented, whether they're more, practically, they want to do something with being able to manage things, and so on and so forth. So there are different fields. All this, to understand them in this totality and to acknowledge these individual traits, what does it do? It gives them a sense of self-worth. So we are acknowledging children as specific individuals. So we need, therefore, to create an environment of love, of care, of encouragement, devoid of comparison or judgment, wherein there is no room to make, where there is plenty of room. They can make mistakes, but we all try to encourage them that they are going to learn through these mistakes. And one of the best means to facilitate their emotional, learning of themselves, because character development is not something which we can, it's not like moral class where we can instruct them, do this, don't do, tell truth, don't tell lies. It just doesn't work that way. It is more possible, and according to the mother also, to make them become more conscious of themselves. The psychological growth is through self-reflection, by making them to become self-aware and conscious of their thoughts, feelings, and action. So right from the primary age, primary school, we have these little reflections. In the kindergarten, in the primary, we ask them, okay, when did you get up? Did you complete your food? Did you waste food? So making them conscious more on a physical level. Then we have different questions in the middle school. Did you fight with somebody? Did you hurt somebody? Did you get angry? Why did you get angry? So on and so forth. So more we try to make the children to become more conscious on an emotional level. And then more in terms of the mind level, more rational level, we try to raise questions and make the high school children come up with their own reflections of whether, they have been able to really make choices more in terms of the pleasure center in them or the truth center in them, and so on and so forth. So we try to give the responsibility of their learning and growth into their own hands, rather than trying to always just explain to them or tell them or to instruct them about what is good and bad, you see. Then we come to the physical education, which is a domain which is, of course, most naturally joyous and closest to the nature of children, but unfortunately disregarded in its importance in all the and most of the schools. We don't really give this importance. Yeah, we have a little quotation here. I'll just read it. Shruti, can you just share that? So the mother says, perfection of the body, as great a perfection as we can bring about by means at our disposal, must be the ultimate aim of physical culture. So the aim is that the body will manifest perfect beauty and harmony. You see, so every school must have a regular, regular games, regular sports. It should be mandatory that schools should have a regular sports as a regular part of the curriculum. So and it is not just like a time pass. So that's what the parents think, and that is what generally is kind of thought as sports to be. But a methodical and comprehensive training of the body through exercises, yogasanas, and comprehensive understanding of what the body stands for, all the different components, not only biological, but it's biologically also the children are going to be aware through the academics, but also to learn, to know and learn about practice of good habits, health, and nutrition. The mother has given at length in her essay on physical education all the different things that we need to become conscious of when we talk of physical education. So during the initial years of school, children should be provided maximum opportunity to learn through play and physical activity. This is what we do in our school. We give them a lot of freedom to learn through play. So unless they are given a lot of space and a lot of room and not made to sit in a chair all the time, that the learning doesn't happen in a joyous manner. So children learn by engaging in sensory and subject games also, which hone their cognitive skills. Okay. So all these different activities on a physical level will fulfill the objective of physical education, which is to celebrate basically beauty, strength, and harmony of the body. Okay, but final thing again, importantly, as mentioned earlier, one needs to remember that all this has to be integrated around the psychic being, the mind, life, body. So the effort is consciously to bring in this deeper values, deeper qualities of the psychic, and enable them to manifest in the outside, through mind, life, and body, through the activities of mind, life, and body. And it is important again to align the activities of mind, life, body to the psychic within. So we come to the third part and the final part of our talk, which is talking about the National Education Policy 2020. So the important question arises, all this we have spoken about a lot, but how this ideal, high ideal of education is to be implemented in educational institutions. I'm sure many of you would have the questions. The role of the teacher and in intermediate education is going to be daunting, to say the least. In fact, the mother said that a teacher has to be a yogi, which is, in other simple terms, a perfected being. You see? So it implies that an integral teacher and parent also, of course, when we speak about teacher, we can speak about parents, can teach least by instruction and more by example and influence. But then what should be the personal qualities and competencies of this integral teacher? What should be the attitudes and psychological mindset which is needed to work in such schools? Are there any prerequisites for this, for the selection of such teachers? How are they to be trained? How are they to teach? You see? So we also know that children are the special gifts of God to parents. You see, they are the ones, actually children are the ones who enable and provide the opportunity for all of us parents to evolve into better human beings. Because just as teachers need to inspire children, parents all the more need to nurture through being good examples. I think all of us know that children, especially these days, don't listen to parents' instructions. The more the parents instruct, the less they listen. So they learn best by observing and emulating them, isn't it? So we need to really be examples. So the mother has given ample guidelines, both for the parents and teachers in this regard. Aurobindo has provided the 3 principles of teaching and has clearly stated the goals of national education 100 years ago, exactly 1920. That's when it got into print form. So it is heartening to note that the education ministry today in our government has considered incorporating these policies of those educational principles laid down by Aurobindo. We are going to find many similarities, and the mother as envisioned in integral education. So we come to the last quotation here. Shruti, can you please share that? So Sri Aurobindo sets the goal of national education in this manner. It is an education proper to the Indian soul and need and temperament and culture that we are in quest of. Not indeed something faithful merely to the past, but to the developing soul of India, to her future need, to the greatness of her coming self-creation, to her eternal spirit. At the same time, he says, our education must be up to date in form and substance and modern in life and spirit. Okay. So I'll just briefly read a few kind of sentences, and I've quoted the NEP directly, so I'm going to read that out. So let us briefly select a few points from NEP 2020 and note how it reflects a few ideas and practices of integral education, although it is still far from its core aim, which is a psychic education. Of course, it's very far from that, but definitely it's taking its first initial steps. So NEP declares at the outset that an education system rooted in Indian ethos that contributes directly to transforming India, that is Bharat, sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high quality education to all and thereby making India a global knowledge superpower. So we see how closely the main ideals are already aligning themselves to what Sri Aurobindo has said. Second, NEP recommends the medium of instruction up to grade 5 and preferably till grade 8 and even beyond to be home language, mother tongue, local language. Also, Sanskrit is to be offered at all levels of school and higher education as an important enriching option for students. So, Sri Aurobindo also states the mother tongue is the proper medium of education, and therefore, the first energies of the child should be directed to the thorough mastering of the medium. So he further asks, the vital question is how we are to learn and make use of Sanskrit and the indigenous languages so as to get to the heart and intimate sense of our own culture and establish a vivid continuity between the still living power of our past and the yet uncreated power of the future. So I'm glad to share with all of you that in our school we have the 4 language formula. We have English as the medium, we have Telugu, we have Hindi, and we have Sanskrit. Sanskrit runs across right from KG till 8th. And till grade 4, all the children learn all the 4 languages. And then they learn, inclusive of 3, either Hindi or Telugu, along with, of course, English as a medium of language. So we are seeing that that really helps in enriching children's lives. Third, NEP talks about holistic development of learners, stating that the aim of education will not only be cognitive development, but also building character and creating holistic and well-rounded individuals equipped with the 21st century skills. So this is again a concept which is so close to integral education. They have even mentioned that ultimately knowledge is a deep-seated treasure and education which helps in its manifestation as a perfection which is already within an individual. This they have clearly taken the quotation from Swami Vivekananda. So NEP elaborates, we are going to the 4th point, elaborates on how experiential learning is to be adopted in all stages. Okay, so NEP is also suggesting greater flexibility of choices and lesser separation among curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular, humanities and sciences, or between vocational or academic streams. So it's encouraging experiential learning. It explains how integrated education needs to get into the classrooms and more, less of divisions between sciences and humanities. And this is one thing we have been very successful be able to do through the project method in our school. So through the project method, we are able to really bring together both the sciences and the humanities so that children can enjoy learning it like an integrated subject and not trying to make compartments in and divisions in between subjects. 5th point, Sri Aurobindo and the mother spoke extensively about the importance of sensorial education and providing an environment of free play. So NEP has laid exclusive stress on play-based, activity-based, and inquiry-based learning at the early years of the child with minimal use of textbooks from age 3 to 6. Again, a glad kind of information to share with all of you that in our school, we don't have textbooks till grade 4. And children learn through learning material, through games, through worksheets. With the exception of Hindi, Telugu, and English for text for reading, we don't have books for other subjects. So that is again something very closely that we are seeing that NEP is encouraging. The 6th point is there has been an overload of information content in the present system of education. So NEP has declared that curriculum content should be reduced in each subject, you see. And so in other words, this is again encouraging creative and critical thinking. They also want that to be promoted. And it is again very much in line with what Sri Aurobindo has spoken about, to building the powers of the mind and training the mental faculties. The 7th one, which is really something very close to my heart. Knowledge of India is a program by NEP which will promote a rootedness and pride in India and its rich, diverse, ancient and modern culture and knowledge systems and traditions. So what we do in our school is every year we come up with some exhibition for an annual exhibition which really is able to celebrate India in different aspects. So the children have really come up doing extensive work in trying to learn about India and celebrate the glorious heritage of India. And for this, I would also like to say that we also have annual Kavi Sammelans in Sanskrit, in Hindi, and in Telugu. really coming up with children reciting poetry from great poets and authors in all these vernacular languages, just to be able to make them feel so proud of our country. And the eighth one is in regarding to the new assessment. So it is also good that I want to share with you the fact that we also have come up with assessment where we talk about their personality and what they're good at. Okay, so just two more points before I conclude. Ninth point is greater autonomy is extended to teachers in choosing aspects of pedagogy. This is NEP declaring it. Wonderful. So this makes it so much possible for the teacher to become a facilitator from, unnecessary teaching and being bogged down by teaching purely a syllabus, which is very, very fixed. So that is again an excellent move. And the 10th point, which is the last point, importantly, NEP states the recognizing, identifying, and fostering the unique capabilities of each student. This is what they have declared. By sensitizing teachers as well as parents to promote each student's holistic development in both academic and non-academic spheres. So they're calling the attention of the teachers to the unique capabilities of each student. And integral education celebrates the fact that every child is unique, every child is special, every child is a soul in evolution, and the child must be able to be, helped to know that uniqueness and enable the child to bring that uniqueness out forward, to let it blossom. So clearly, I think for us students and disciples of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, we see a bright future for education in India to fulfill itself in the vision of integral education, as National Education Policy 2020 is taking at least definitely the initial steps in this direction. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Congratulations, Chala.
Thank you.
Well, I call it Chala, not Dr. Chhalamayi Reddy, because Chala is my younger sister. Well, I'm glad to see that she has really covered right from ancient times to the modern times and also the National Education Program. Well, as you very rightly pointed out, that we are very glad that NEP National Education Program has at last and ultimately come up. If not directly, but indirectly, they have taken over lots of funds from Aurobindo and all that. And it's been a very beautiful, gradual narration, the ancient system of education, the present system, and what's happening in our school. It's been a very good balance of theory and practical things. So I don't think I would like to add more, because you have given a very comprehensive vision of the education system. Except that, as you said, you are a student of the ashram. Being your elder brother, I too was a student of the ashram school. So maybe 2 or 3 minutes if I can take extra time from you. Yeah, you see, this system that we followed at the ashram was pretty different. And this ashram had come up with a unique system of free education. And because as I was a student, maybe in 2 minutes, I'll relate to you what was my daily program of a student. You see, we used to go to the class in the morning as usual, about 4:38. And then we were sitting all of us in a big hall. This is a section of middle class students, classes 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And each one of us could take up any subject of the day for the day. I could start with mathematics, where my other friend would start with English, another friend would start with geography. We had no compulsion to say, hey, you must first period. There were no ideas, periods at that time. So we were given full freedom, so that you say, I'm in a mood to do poetry, so I start that with poetry, and maybe for 1 hour or 2 hours, it doesn't matter. After 1 hour, maybe I say, okay, I'll let it stick to geography or to history or something. So this was a free progress system, as we call it, the mother calls it, free progress system. So we used to have, we are given the real freedom to progress exactly as we want to progress, in the speed with which we want to progress. So there's no question of promoting from 5th class to 6th class to 7th class. There's no such division. So it was really a Chela gave us the knowledge that integral education is a joyous alternative. Yeah, we had the joy of education. And as you rightly pointed out, several quotations from the mother, it's not the question of earning money, it's not the question of, for a job or for credentials. It's purely to progress and to have a free progress. So this was a beautiful system, and we passed through all that. And this is where the question of free progress comes in. And I think this is very unique to this integral education, that the individual is important, as Chala very rightly said constantly about the importance of the education of the psychic being. But that education, the outer principle, the systemic principle, is the freedom allowed. And also, as Chala rightly said toward the end, that we in our school do not have textbooks till the class 4. Yeah, that's already a great freedom. And of course, what we did in the ashram cannot be repeated in the outside schools. I'm aware of that also, because outside you have a number of 40 children, 30 children per class. Whereas in our ashram school, we didn't have that big a number. So our teachers used to sit on one side, and whatever problem we had in my subject, I used to go to the particular teacher and ask. So that way, there's no question of timetable, no question of subject table, and we could spend the day. But only at the end of the year, they'll say, try to finish so many lessons at your own pace. If you cannot, doesn't matter, you go to the next year. So this was our experiential learning that we had at the ashram. Even when we went to college, as Stella mentioned the one word project method. Yes, we had a project method. It was also, we could have a 3-month project or a 6-month project or a 1-year project. So there was the basic thing of this free program system was freedom. But that is exactly where the individual soul grows, exactly as it wants to grow, express the way what it wants to express. And as Chala very rightly pointed out, that the outer is only an instrumentation. So we had to sharpen our instruments so that the real resident, the real person within, can use our instruments. So that was the meaning of the integral education of the outer being. So we are not given extra importance of the physical education or the mental or the vital, because you never know what your being wants to. It may want to express itself as an artist, or as a physical education master, or as a philosopher. You don't know. The mother said, no, don't have any emphasis on only one instrument. Have an equal distribution, equal development of all the three. And Chela has given us the systematic development of all the 3 levels. So this was in just what we really went through. That's why I can tell you out of my own experience. This was a system, but I'm also aware, of course, I'm connected with the school of Aurobindo International School, but we cannot implement this entire thing there. But Chela has done a wonderful job to really bring out as much as possible the principles, the ideas. And that is the beauty of integral education. It adapts itself to each country, to each society, to each state. So what is there in Hyderabad may not be there in Bangalore or in Orissa or in Calcutta or even in England or in USA. That is the beauty. It's not a system. Integral education is not a system. It's an ideal. Exactly like integral yoga is not a system, it is also an ideal. Given to individuals to follow exactly the way you want to, with the speed that you want to, with the sincerity that you want to. That is exactly the spiritual approach to yoga or to education. So that is why we can say integral education is basically, as she has been telling, the psychic education. In a broad term, we can say it's truly spiritual education, giving the freedom of the growth to the individual. And this is what is really emphasized. So if this freedom is given to the child, then he expresses this freedom when he goes out of the school also. Self-thinking, what Aurobindo would say, we have to learn to think for ourselves. All this is, in fact, I've also read this national education program where they emphasize not the learning by heart, but this question of questioning, developing rational capacity. That's where Aurobindo had once written that we are weakest, we are really poor in really not having an original thinking. We used to have great thinkers, great masters, no doubt about that. But because of this long slavery, we have lost the capacity to think for ourselves. We have become perfect imitators. So this education, even this education or the national education, has brought back this emphasis. So I'm glad, Chhala, you have given us a very beautiful survey of the whole thing, and we have got a good idea of what we are doing at Ashram, the Hyderabad school. And of course, I wanted to add a little bit of the Ashram school, and because I have gone through experientially, and we can have further sessions on this. But I'm glad we are looking forward to you for the next coming months also. You'll be giving more talks. But there we have to think of a more elaborate. Yeah. Now I can say, Dr. Chhalamayi, thanks a lot. What a wonderful job. There are
Thank
some
you.
questions. You'll have to take them on the WhatsApp group because we don't have
Yes,
much
I will.
time. Yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you have portrayed a very beautiful way. Thanks a lot, dear.